just so that we have it online. So apostolic mission, she was saying, is like the early apostles, what they experienced, right? Jesus sent them out, and there weren't parish churches, right? There weren't dioceses, all these things. They had to go out and one by one preach the gospel and proclaim the good news, and, all of a sudden Christianity began to run rampant in the midst of a culture that was actively persecuting it and killing Christians, right? The early church, the first, few hundred years and all of that. So it's not Christendom anymore. We're going to back up and talk about why. So society's imaginative vision. An imaginative vision is the assumptions or the ways of viewing the world that are taken for granted, that form the basis for societal norms and individual actions, right? So at one time, society's imaginative vision, meaning the assumption that sort of ran what we did and how we thought and how we acted, was in fact Judeo-Christian, right? It was Christian, but also from the Judeo-Christian, values and culture system. And it is not that anymore, and that's what this whole presentation is about, this whole mission, is if it's not Christendom anymore, well, what is it? And we're going to keep asking that, and we're going to keep reflecting on that, and there's no one statement answer that's going to, sum it all up, but we're going to talk about pieces of that. So because of that, different circumstances require different strategies. We're going to go into that in a few moments. And there are two modes, ultimately, we just said them, by which the church engages society to build the kingdom. And we just said those two modes are Christendom and apostolic mission, right? So Christianity, under Christendom, and the culture on the same page, right? Stores are closed on Sundays. People, there are prayer in public schools, things like that. Christians also are living the Christian life, right? In Christendom, everyone's going to Mass, everyone's going to faith formation. It's just kind of everyone's doing it together. And then what is the mode or the response of the church to this, society's imaginative vision is just maintenance. Great, wonderful. We got to extend a little bit to our parish, build it out a little bit. Great, accommodate some more people. We just keep everything going. The Knights of Columbus, the Holy Name Society, everybody just keeps meeting. They do their own things. They have Valentine's Day dinner dances. They have this, they have that. And you just keep going along, and everyone just keeps coming, right? And they're coming for different reasons. And in Christendom, it's not that everybody believes, but everybody's sort of acting the same way. And the hard part about Christendom is you really don't get to the surface level of where somebody's heart at, right? You have people sometimes just going through the motions. Not everybody, obviously, but sometimes that's a downside of being in a Christian society and culture is no one talks or reflects on it. You just kind of go with the motions, right? So that's Christendom. So there you go. Apostolic mission is the next one, is when society and culture need to be evangelized again with the good news of God's love and salvation in Christ, right? So you basically presume people don't really know the Christian message. They really don't know God. They don't know Jesus Christ. And they don't know that because we're going to see there's something else at play. Right? There's something else, underneath our society, our culture that's driving everything going on. And because of that, there's a lack of awareness or knowledge of that. Well, what is the result of that? I've said it a lot of times, not my phrase, but I use it, the crisis of faith, right? A crisis of faith. And somebody said, well, no, it's not a crisis of faith, it's just people are apathetic. Well, that's a crisis, right? Because there's no faith. And you see the crisis of faith in so many different ways now. In the time of apostolic mission, you see it in society, you see it in the church, you see it within each person, right? We've talked about this a little bit. Some of those areas are there's a rampant fear of death because we don't believe in eternal life or we don't trust that God will get us there. We talked about it in the church. We have the majority of young people and families just, coming to the church, if at all, for different things other than worship and Mass. And a lot of different examples that we can talk about if we have more time. But there's this crisis of faith going on. We see that. You talk about it to me and your families. Many of you have children or grandchildren. You raised them in the faith. You brought them. You talked about it with them. And they're not here, right? And for various reasons. So you've got this crisis of faith. Well, what's the response to that? We act as witnesses and we act as leaven in the world, right? So witnesses to the faith, to Jesus Christ, and as this something that's going to bring something to society we believe will in fact enhance it and be for the good, right? So that's what we're called to do now. So notice the difference here. We're not just maintaining. And that's the thing. That's the area people struggle with. It's not the same. You can't just do what you were doing before and expect different results, right? It's not working. So things have to change and adapt to different circumstances. What are we doing now? We're not just sitting back and maintaining. We're actively acting as witnesses, right? We're going out, we're talking, and that's difficult because you really have to engage people who are not really wanting to be engaged all the time, or sometimes maybe even at all. Right, so that's a more challenging thing we have to do in the apostolic mission. So that's kind of an overview of what we did last year and talked about, which is now the basis for what we're going to do tonight and moving forward. So the book has this great quote in it. It begins with, "It is possible to do many Catholic things," you can see this on the screens, "and yet not have a Catholic mind." It is possible to do many Catholic things and yet not have a Catholic mind. Anyone have an example of that? Yes?
People that are Catholic that don't believe in the true presence.
Okay, right. So people who are like, yeah, I go to church every Sunday, but I don't really believe that that's Jesus in the Eucharist. Okay, good. Yeah.
I'll go for the Dow Family Classic. You bring your kids to get the sacraments, but you don't attend Mass together, and when you tell them, you don't have to go and practice your faith anymore once you're confirmed.
Yeah, right. So you're coming for the sacraments, these rituals. Yep, I got my first communion money, I got my confirmation, my graduation certificate, I move on, all of that. Yep, those are Catholic things, but not a Catholic mind. Anything else, Jim?
People who are extremely charitable. I know people who take food baskets around Christmas. Wonderful people. They give a lot of money, but they wouldn't step into a church.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they do a lot of Catholic things.
Yep.
And I've even said to them, you guys would be great Catholics.
Yes, exactly. So people who are doing, charitable acts, right, that's a good thing, that's a good human thing to do, but right there, and maybe they are Catholic doing those things, but they're not doing the other things, right? How about it's Lent, fish fries? Right? Fish fries. Oh my gosh, that's the Catholic thing, right? All right, so there's a lot you can do to have Catholic things but not a Catholic mind, but in people's minds they are Catholic, right? That's the challenge, right? Okay, so the next thing is, in the introduction to the book, a couple of points that they make, and these are good things to reflect on. Number one, the Christian faith is being abandoned and replaced by another very different and quite potent way of viewing the world. So we can't just realize Christianity is being abandoned, but it's being replaced. Something else is there. What is it? And it's not just anything. It says here it's quite potent, powerful. A powerful way of viewing the world. So what is that we're going to look at? Second point is new responses are needed to deal with new challenges. We've already said that, right? It's not the same, so what is the reality, and then how do we respond to that? That's kind of what our goal is here. And then the third point is we have to take up an apostolic stance, right? So it's devising strategies that begin with the understanding that we're in a non-Christian environment, right? So you got to come to terms with that, and that takes time. It's not just, oh yeah, I understand now. We got to alter this, but not that, Father, right? I like that over there, right? We can't alter that one. We can alter this one, but not that one, right? And that's not the way we're working. It's looking at everything and understanding where we're at, what's going on, and what strategies that we need in this new non-Christian environment. So a couple of other things, entering into this Lenten mission. The book tells us that there is no blueprint that they're providing us with. Why is that? Because there's no one program or one model for evangelization or faith formation that will act as a cure-all, right? So if you catch in yourself the tendency to say, well, if we just did this, then it would correct everything. You've got to rethink that, right? It might work for some and in some places, but not for all. What works instead, it tells us, are these creative minorities. So what does that mean? It means that there are new apostolates and movements and programs for parish renewal and diocesan evangelization and church efforts that are making their way. They're small, but they're making their way against steady headwinds, right? They're going slowly. They're not in large numbers, but the key is they're faithful. That's the key. They're faithful to the gospel, they're faithful to Christ, they're faithful to the church. And they're likely, in time, to become well springs of significant transformation as they're given time to grow. So, for example, you think of all the way back, thousands of years, hundreds of years ago, you've got the rise of monasteries. We talked about this last year, St. Benedict. All of a sudden, a couple of people say, hey, you know what, the world around us is not living the faith. We want to go off. We feel God's calling us to go off into this solitary life and just pray. And what happened? People saw them, and they started joining them because they were faithful, and more people joined them. Next thing you know, these giant monastery fortresses, right, were being built all throughout Europe in a record time. And as time went on, of course, what happens? What starts off as Christian becomes sometimes secularized, right? They become powerhouses for rulers and kings and so on. So this is cyclical, right? But this creative minorities idea was from Benedict XVI. He said, it'll be a much smaller church, but a more faithful church. And a lot of people say, well, that's terrible. It should just be a big church. Not if it's not faithful, right? That's how we're in the position we're in now. A big church was not faithful, and therefore, people just fell away because they didn't see the true faith, or their hearts weren't touched, they weren't converted, right? So it's these small movements that are going steady, and look for them because they're actually out there happening in little ways. The second thing it tells us is there's a temptation for us to look for success in certain techniques. Well, we're going to do this because this is going to be successful, right? And that's not what we're about, right? Mother Teresa, the Lord's not asking us to be successful, but to be faithful, right? And then it says instead, we're going to get a hold on fundamental principles that should inform whatever strategies we develop. So there's no blueprint that says, okay, Divine Mercy and Sacred Heart, you do these things like this, and then everything's going to turn around for you, right? It's going to be this. You're going to experience growth. We're looking for fundamental principles, right, that should inform the strategies we develop. That's what this is about. Okay, that's the introduction. And now what it does is it talks about the religion of the day. And let's see if I can find where I am at. There we go. The three-front Christian battle that's part of it. So we're fighting a battle on three fronts. First, there's an external battle against the unbelief of a fallen world, right? So this is a world that is a godless world, right? So people who are, actively, persecuting Christians because they don't like the fact that they're calling people to conversion and stuff like that. I mean, this is a dark area, right? This is not just, you're going to see the next battle, it's not just people falling away from the faith. This is a fallen world corrupted by sin that is, rebelling constantly against God in very powerful ways. This is, deep stuff. The second battle is internal. So that's external. You've got the church kind of against this unbelief of a fallen world. We don't believe that there is God. It's all for naught. Let's just, go about our lives and live as if this is all there is. The second battle is internal. And that's against disloyalty and corruption among church members. We're not just talking about the Pope or bishops or priests or religious. We're talking about everybody in the church. The disloyalty, right? The people who are, I belong to Sacred Heart or Divine Mercy, but I never go, right? The corruption, right? Yeah, I'm Catholic, but I live this sinful life publicly that everybody knows about, right? So you've got that internal battle going on. People who are saying, yeah, I do this, and don't, I believe this, or this is what Christianity is, but they're actually not living it. And the third battle is against the darkness and unbelief within ourselves. So thinking about, what do I struggle with? What do I do? Is it life after death? Is it, the suffering that's going on around me or within me? Or what is my struggle? Where's the darkness and unbelief within me? And those are the three sort of battles that we're looking at in this whole enterprise. So the structure of looking at all of this is, what is the religion that we need to be converted out of? And if we are to be converted to Christ, right? So we got to think about, well, what do we got to get away from in order to get, to the next step, which is back to the Lord, or to the Lord for the first time. And so part of that is addressing an inadequate view of the church, which the book does a great job of, very often people think of it in a way that it isn't in reality. Well, the church is supposed to be this perfect society. No one's supposed to be sinning in the church and all these things like that. And you got to have a realistic view. What did Jesus establish it actually to do? To be a hospital, to be a field hospital, to be a place where people come for mercy and so on. So, of course, there's imperfection and sin there that's being worked out. And the last thing is to live as faithful followers of Jesus Christ. That's the structure of kind of our presentations in the material. What do we got to get away from? How do we have to look at the church we belong to? And how do we live then as faithful followers of Jesus Christ? Okay, now on to the religion of the day. So, a couple of things about this. Number one, the Christian faith, as we said, is being abandoned and replaced by a very different and quite potent way of viewing the world. New responses are needed. We need an apostolic stance. So the religion of the day, this very long term, and again, this is descriptive of what it is. It's in the book called to be a modern, neo-Gnostic, progressive, utopian, revolutionary religion. That's what it is. Okay? And so the book's going to refer to it simply as progressive religion. All right, so there it is. And I'm not going to start explaining it now because it's going to get into all of that. So all those words are heavily packed, right? Each of those words has a very heavy meaning to it. So we have that as part of it. Now the interesting thing is, in terms of our modern religious age, we often think of the fact that no one's religious. We see this rise of people saying, I'm a nothing, right? I'm an N-O-N-E, a none. I don't have any religious affiliation. But what is religion really? Religion is a particular set of beliefs and practices that a person or a society holds in order to provide a meaningful vision and narrative of life. Basically, they're answering why we are alive and what we are living for. So everybody has those questions in mind and beliefs that they act according to answer them. So that means that we are in a very highly religious age, right? Various religious beliefs and understanding. Religion, broadly understood, is this general set of beliefs and practices a person or society holds to provide a meaningful vision. What gives my life meaning? And a narrative. What's my purpose? Why am I here? And because of that, again, this is a very highly religious age and time. Now, the religion of the day does not go by a single name, right? I just gave you that long descriptive phrase. It doesn't go by a single name because it's so complex and multivalent. But it centers around a very old enemy of Christianity from the beginning, which is Gnosticism. And Gnosticism, very easily put, is this understanding that the material world in which we live is fundamentally bad, right? So already we got an issue, right? God created everything to be fundamentally good. And my goal and purpose is to escape it, to get out of it. And I do that not by, looking to a higher power or being, but what I develop within myself. Whatever inner knowledge or knowledge I have, maybe and you don't have, or this group has and this other group doesn't have. So this specialized knowledge is going to get me out of this fallen world by a revolution and a breaking of everything from the past and just moving forward, right? That's very simplistic, and they're going to go deeper into it, and we're going to talk more about it. But that's essentially what it is, this idea that I can do it. Right? It's about me. I can direct my own salvation here. And that's one of the key issues. Okay, so it is not, in terms of not a religion, modern progressive religion is not usually recognized as a religion, but in fact it is. Because people, although they're highly rational and scientific and non-religious, yes, we don't do that religion thing. In this modern religion we're going to be talking about, the religion of the day, there are dogmas, right? There are things that people believe and hold to be true. There's the looking for fellow believers. Who's going to join me in this, right? There's the idea of heretics. Well, that's not right what you just said, right? That's not in accord with what we think our dogma is over here, right? So that's we're in, you're out. And then there's the problem is that even though this is looked at as not a religion, the problem is there's a lack of thought to investigate dogma necessary for any intelligently held religious faith, right? So they're saying it's not a religion because we're smarter than that, but in fact it is, but there's no reflection on what that really means. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's kind of what is at play here in terms of all that's going on. All right, so lastly, we're going to end up here is the structure of the modern progressive religion. And again, it's that long name that I gave you ahead of time. So if you look at the screens, a modern neo-Gnostic belief system is a scheme of self-initiated salvation, right? So there's a recognition we need some sort of salvation here. The world's bad, right? Material world's bad, but it's self-initiated. It's going to come from me on my own terms. And that self-initiated salvation locates the source of the world's evil, not in the individual human heart, but in fundamentally corrupted and therefore oppressive structures of human existence, whether spiritual, material, societal, or psychological. So the evil around us is not because of a world affected by sin and my turning away from God or turning in on myself. It's not in my heart, it's in the structures around me. Those are the evil things we got to get rid of, right? This is the modern progressive religion that promises to radically overcome this evil of the world and the alienation and lack of fulfillment experienced by humans. So there's this great promise. We're gonna seize the day and get rid of this, right? We can do it. That claims to bring about a new type of that accomplishes this salvation through escape from destruction of prevailing structures of oppression, however they may be identified. So again, this evil we're going to overcome in these structures, we're going to escape from them. We're going to get rid of them, right? Whatever was before us is now gone. And that claims to bring about a new type of human. You're going to be a new person, right, in all of this. You're going to be smarter and stronger and all of that. To inaugurate an entirely new age of freedom, right? No one holding us back, that has overcome the past age of oppression. Like our poor grandparents and parents, they didn't know what they were doing. You know, they were just simple and they were doing whatever. We know what we're doing here. We're smarter, and you know, anything they did, it doesn't even matter, right? We're free now to do what we want. This new age of freedom, and that accomplishes its salvation through the application of some form of specialized technical knowledge, gnosis, right? This knowledge that only we have, right? So that's kind of what is at stake with this modern progressive religion. And you can see already some of the real issues with Christianity. Self-initiated salvation. Last I checked, there was only one Savior of the world, Jesus Christ, right? That locates evil within, the structures of the world or whatever. Again, we know where evil comes from, and we even experience that. You don't need faith to understand that. You can see people, who do things that are fundamentally bad, right? Their hearts aren't in the right place. And this idea that we're going to radically overcome it ourselves, like here we are 2025, it hasn't happened yet, right? So all of these things, we're going to look at in terms of how they don't line up with Christianity, but they're very strong and powerful in the mindset and heart of many people in society today, and that's what we got to get out of or away from or be aware of to get to Christ, right? We can't get to Christ without that. Now, the spiritual quality of this whole modern progressive religion is essentially an expression of human pride, right? It's about me. I can do it on my own. I don't need God. I don't need anybody else, a church telling me what to do. It's about what I want, when I want, how I want. So that's essentially what it is. And this beautiful quote kind of sums it up here. This is from G.K. Chesterton, it was in the book. And he said, "It was no flock of sheep the Christian shepherd was leading, but a herd of bulls and tigers of terrible ideals and devouring doctrines, each one of them strong enough to turn to a false religion and lay waste of the world." Right? So this idea that, people are not wanting to be led by God through the church and things like that, but this idea that they want to determine and lead themselves, and they're going to develop their own religion around that. And that's going to look a lot different in varied ways. So the tragic end of progressive religion is this. It seeks to seize the overall narrative of Christianity, right? So the narrative is like creation, sin, redemption. There's the narrative of our faith. It takes that narrative and sort of incorporates it in an upside-down, twisted sort of way. And then it directs it to self-redemption, right? So take there's creation, there's sin, there's redemption, but it's you. It's you that's going to accomplish that. And we know from experience in our own lives that that's not true for many reasons. And as a result of that, it's going to pursue a destructive course, claiming the dramatic sweep, moral seriousness, and missionary spirit of Christianity from which it arose and to which it owes most of its power, even as it lays waste the world. Right? So it's going to take this destructive course in a different way, taking the stuff of Christianity and doing it in a new, powerful way that's upside down and turned around. Okay? So that's kind of all that we're looking at here with this modern progressive religion that we're going to look at in the next sessions, right? So this idea that what is it about? How do we respond to it? These are some of the fundamental things.